Under this Aquarius solar eclipse, the silenced archetype of the natural feminine roars and comes to life. And the new karmic chapter, represented by a solar eclipse, reflects a break from the archetypal father. For this conversation, where I'm going to do a really deep dive into what this Aquarius solar eclipse means, I want you all to know that I am pulling in five asteroid goddesses that are very prominent right now in tandem with the asteroid Lucifer. And it is very important, I feel like, globally, with what is going on in the world, to talk about and pull in these archetypes. So, if you're new here, my name is Jordyn Smith, and I am the voice and the astrologer for this YouTube channel, Nonconformist Conscience. Before I get into this, let's talk a little bit about what a solar eclipse is. It is when a new moon happens within 12 degrees of the lunar axis, the lunar nodal axis, okay? And sometimes there can be out of sign um, eclipses. And this is what this is. This is an eclipse that is happening at 28 degrees Aquarius, and yet it is still conjunct within 10 degrees the lunar north node in Pisces. So it brings in the dynamic of culmination, um, not only seen with Pisces being the north node, but also with the eclipse happening in the sign right before Pisces. And there are other signatures here that speak to culmination, but yet new beginnings, new karmic chapters, which is what a solar eclipse is indicative of. And it is most powerful within the first 2 weeks until the preceding eclipse, which I will make a separate video for. But it is very much potent during this 2 week period before that lunar eclipse. So we have this karmic beginning, this new karmic evolutionary chapter that is indicative of the new moon in Aquarius happening in close proximity to the lunar north node. Whereas, you know, the lunar eclipse that's happening will be reflecting karmic endings. So this is on personal and collective levels, and it happens um, most intensely for people that these planets are conversating with within your own natal chart, okay? We will see global events happen. We've already been seeing them happen leading up to this lunation. There is so many different um, astrological conversations and ingresses that have been happening that started with a bang at the beginning of February. 3 days after this eclipse is when the perfection of Saturn and Neptune conjunction happen. So on the 20th, whereas this is happening on February 17th, that's happening on February 20th. Yet Saturn did enter into the sign of Aries, and it is balsamic to Neptune. So this is showing that archetypal dynamic of there is a karmic beginning represented by the new moon, solar eclipse in Aquarius, and Saturn entering into Aries, but yet there's a culminating process. Something is needing to end, and it's going to be seeded into the collective consciousness more pronounced when the Virgo lunar eclipse happens. But this is going to be showing us these themes, okay? Before I bring in the asteroid archetypes to all of this, it's important for me to talk about how this eclipse, to me, really reflects the break with the father. When we think about the patriarchy what does patriarchy actually mean? It means the rule of the father, right? It's whenever back in, roughly 8,000 years ago, things switched from a more matrilineal existence, meaning that everyone, no matter gender was not a construct back then. It represented that the feminine and masculine principle were held at equal regard. So there are natural principles within the feminine and the masculine that everyone has, regardless of gender. This is not a gender dynamic, as a bottom line. But what this is indicative of is that once that switch happened into the patriarchy, which was roughly around the last time that Saturn and Neptune were conjunct at 0 degrees Aries. That is the last time that that happened. Okay. That means that things were no longer harmonizing with the divine feminine or the natural feminine, or we could just say the feminine and masculine principles. All right. It switched over to an emphasis on the masculine principles. And when there is an emphasis on one or the other, it creates disharmony and it becomes distorted. So, what do I mean by this? And how does this connect with this eclipse? The patriarchy is really seen in the archetype of Capricorn, Saturn, the 10th house. And there is a natural linkage between Aquarius and or Uranus and Saturn. It's where whatever the conditioning is, Saturn, the beliefs, the values, the laws, the taboos, the structures held within society, held within government systems, any type of structures, family systems, are rooted in a overarching consensus. And right now, it is the emphasis on the masculine principle, which is externalized. It is not as internalized as the feminine principle. Again, everybody has these held within them. But the masculine principles, it highlights more of material analysis, logic, product, doing, perfection, abstraction, things dealing with the head. It's goal oriented, it's demanding, it's independent, it's our individual identity, it's future time, it's conquest of nature, and it's very verbal. All right. Whereas the feminine principle is linked with like intuition and process and being and completeness and um, concreteness and the heart and people and synthesis and people oriented, accommodating, interdependency, group identity, actual time, present time, harmony with nature, and nonverbal. It can be more internalized, right? And each and every single one of us have these components within us. But because of the patriarchy that is deeply ingratiated into the totality of consciousness right now within our structures and how there's an imbalance, it is because things have become overemphasized. And really, these qualities, which the qualities of the feminine and masculine principles, they're neutral. They're neither wrong, bad, good, right, when they are harmonizing and working together. When there's the overemphasis on one or the other, things become distorted. And when we're looking at how there's been an overemphasis on the masculine principle, i.e., the rule of the father, which happened, where we take a man's last name and we're given to a man, or men are not supposed to feel, they'll be called a wuss, and they're supposed to be more oriented in embodying all of the masculine principles and throwing off all the feminine principles, and vice versa. And there's these gender constructs. It really highlights a value. And the value that has become distorted within this is, as a bottom line, over identification with power, right? And that over identification with power and allowing that to run the show is where we see the subjugation of other groups. Because when we are valuing only power and none of these feminine principles, this is where we get a top-down approach. It's where we get different countries seeking to overpower other countries, i.e., subjugation, groups of people, because what it's leading to is this moral superiority. One has to be the best, the most powerful, the strive for this distorted sense of perfection, which is actually an illusion. It's not real. Um, and so it becomes dominating, and it creates war, and it creates persecution of whole groups of people. There's not a harmonization going on. And so this is why I'm saying we are seeing this full force, not only in the United States, but we are seeing it in Iran. We are seeing it in Gaza. We are seeing it pretty much everywhere. Like, we're seeing it in different countries within Africa. Like, this is going on. Russia, just look at the world right now and what is happening. There is a imbalance that has been created, and it is the rule of the father. Even think about in America, a lot of people started calling the president daddy. A lot of people have been for a long time looking to externalized authority to save them, right? This is kind of pulling in the South Node of Virgo here, and how that is, and bringing in Neptune and Saturn as well. That is where we have collectively given authority, given power over to people and leadership authority roles, and we've been indiscriminate about it. And it is because we have not come together as a community, which is very much the feminine principle of interdependence, not independence, right? Where we know that everyone has a certain role, a function. We even see it still play out in the world right now. Think about how if one thing happens in one country, it affects the whole. That just reflects that natural law of unity and diversity and interdependence, right? And yet there's an overemphasis on who's going to be the most powerful, who's going to affect everyone else instead of working together. And working together is very much an Aquarian dynamic, okay? And Aquarius is also very much about revolution. And revolution is not reform. Reform are small actions implemented within a structure that take time, whereas revolution is quick, fast, and it is about a new structure forming and the old structure being liberated from. And so we can see with this new moon, this solar eclipse in Aquarius, that there is a new karmic chapter that is unfolding. That is the Aquarian break with the proverbial father, the patriarchy. It is where there has been so much crisis, lunar south node, that has been happening, whether personally or collectively, which I see very much collectively right now, that it has reached an all-time high where groups of people, Aquarius, are being persecuted, Virgo. And because of this and the disillusioning Pisces experience of realizing that authority, or those who are the powers that be running the show, are not going to save us, where we projected ideals and needs and values onto these authority figures and were indiscriminate, or meaning not discerning, or not rooted based in actual reality, that we now collectively are experiencing disillusionment across the globe pertaining to with the father, the authority, the leadership, the powers that be. And what is it doing through that crisis of disillusionment? Well, people are coming together in community. They are taking action. They are saying enough is enough. And they are confronted with the actual reality and the actual truth. Nothing like a Virgo crisis to help community, Aquarius, come together. So we're seeing this with Pluto and Aquarius. We're also seeing there's a natural inconjunct that happens between Virgo and Aquarius. And so that is where trauma, Aquarius, and crisis, Virgo, can happen to confront through this alienating feeling, and where there is need for Virgo-like improvement and adjustment and purging through the Aquarian function of community and um, unity and diversity, giving, sharing, inclusion. And that helps for revolution through the liberation of the past, where there's been the distorted Virgo dynamics and Capricornian dynamics playing out. So even people on personal levels are seeing the break with the father, right? Whether it be understanding this in your partnerships, if you're a female, if you're a man, understanding it in those partnerships, or where you're needing to connect with your emotions and your emotional body, the messages you've taken in, right? Where we are looking at how family systems have been structured. And there are so many terms right now floating around about narcissistic family systems, scapegoating, all of these things. And guess what? It is a reflection of what is happening, the micro and the macro, because it is a trickle down effect. And so there are a lot of people who are confronting this on personal levels too, of I've checked these boxes and I realized my life is not what I thought it was going to be, because I gave my authority over to what I was told would make me happy. And it was rooted in these values based in the masculine principle and the over identification with it. So the key becomes, how on personal levels do we merge the masculine and feminine principles? How on a communal level do we start to do this? And so this is really indicative of what is going on in this eclipse chart. We have Uranus in Taurus, now direct, ruling this eclipse and in what we call a last quarter square to it. Okay. And a last quarter square, or last quarter phase in general, is a crisis in consciousness or a crisis in beliefs. What are we having right now going on? And so, what is this pertaining to? Groups of people, the community, humanity. And where does Uranus and Taurus, that is now direct, right? Making its last pass through the sign of Taurus, which it had been since May of 2018 when Pluto was still in Capricorn and we saw the underbelly of the patriarchy. And before this nodal shift happened, we had Pluto and Capricorn squaring the axis of Libra and Aries, right? That, wow, eye-popping to think about and what was going on too, and the choices that we are now experiencing the consequences of because we didn't act in the way that we, or didn't choose the way that we were supposed to on a collective level, right? So Uranus and Taurus right now square the moon, which it's ruling, is a need to act on this new evolutionary karmic chapter of liberating from the fixed Aquarius Taurus values, Taurus, that have been ingrained within social structures. It is a time to act on integrating more timeless, universal values based in the natural laws of giving, sharing, and inclusion, where we harmonize the masculine and the feminine principle. We don't go from one extreme to the other. There is a need for a merging to happen. And this is where we see the ruler of Uranus, Venus, and the sign of Pisces conjunct the lunar north node. And that is reflecting the need and the necessity on a collective level for healing to happen within the collective consciousness, Pisces, for us to apply the lessons, the wisdom, and the philosophies that we have been learning about regarding our values, right? And to fully integrate this in order for a revolution or inwardly and externally to occur. Saturn and Pisces had been about this time of culminating old structures within our individual consciousness and within the collective conscious. And Saturn is now in Aries. It is balsamic to Neptune. So it's conjunct. Like I said, it perfects on the 20th, 3 days after this eclipse. It will be conjunct during the lunar eclipse, right? That's a lot to unpack right there, too. But what does this mean with this conjunction still happening and Neptune ruling the lunar north node and Venus? It also rules Mercury, um, which I will get into in a minute as well. But this is where we are called to act, to take action in order to implement what needs to be implemented and to continue to observe, Aquarius, what it is that is needing to be eliminated, Pluto. How this helps with the culmination of prior structures where there has been an over-identification with the masculine principle, Aries, and how this is wanting to dissolve so that there is a new way of relating not only inwardly with ourselves, but through community and with others. Does this mean that there's going to be a big like kumbaya and some type of, you know, collective enlightenment overnight? No. This is a marathon and not a sprint, because this is going to be seen over the next 6 months of this unfolding, and yet there is still free will and free choice collectively. What are we going to do? Are we going to continue to wait for people to save us? Or are we going to come together as a community and create that new foundation? This is where we see new government structures not only happen, but this is also where we see new parties form, right? Um, we've seen this in the past with, Uranus and Gemini, in America's chart, and Neptune and Aries, all of this. We've seen this. This is where like grassroots efforts happen. It's where we saw Jacksonian democracy and, democracy form through Jefferson. Yet, and Lucretia, who I'm going to talk about in a minute, we really saw this with the fall of the Roman monarchy and the Roman democracy starting to happen. But yet, we don't know what that new structure, party, whatever is going to be. And so it's imperative for each one of us individually to understand what is unique, Aquarius, about each one of us, and to act on what would be beneficial for the whole group, no matter how small or insignificant it feels or appears to each one of us, where we might be doubting, like, is this really going to help? Or why would I even try? Or no, do it, because this is going to help with whatever revolutions are wanting to unfold, not just here in America, but globally as well. And so it's the integration of these values, of this wisdom, of understanding that there is unity and diversity, and being unique and different is actually its own kind of power, and it's necessary, and it actually helps other people because you mirror to them, hey, like that person is doing their thing, like maybe I could do it too. Like these stories need to be shared, things need to be expressed. We need people to be the spiritual warriors, to say things, to speak, to create the action, to be the change that we wish to see in the world, right? So there is this unfolding, and this, not only this need to act, seen with the square from Uranus to the moon, but also with Neptune, Saturn, and Aries, but also Venus conjunct the lunar north node. Then we also have Mercury in Pisces, which is the ruler of the lunar south node of Virgo. It's also ruled by Neptune and Aries. It's separating from the lunar north node. This really reflects, especially because it is the ruler of the lunar south node, that there are solutions and knowledge that we have that we've gained from prior experiences, lunar south node, that are meant to be applied right now to create that action to help create these new foundations and structures. Mercury is conjunct its own planetary north node. It's in a new phase to that planetary north node. So it's really asking for this to be implemented and to keep going, right? To not doubt ourselves, but to truly leap into the abyss of the unknown right now with faith and trust instead of being afraid. Because right now, we are sensing this Piscean Neptunian dynamic of there is something on the horizon, but we don't know what it is. And so we are in this liminal space. And being in a liminal space doesn't mean to stop acting. It means that no, you're in the home stretch of something, right? And that's when, if you're in a race and you're like so fatigued and you're so tired and like you see like the finish line, you are pushing it. You're like, I'm almost there. Like you wanted to give up. You're so thirsty. And it's like you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, even if you're exhausted, and you go because in it, and there's something in you that like forces you, compels you to keep going, and that you're going to cross that finish line. You muster up something inside of you that you didn't even know you have, and you go, you gun it. And that is Mercury conjunct its lunar north, I mean, it's planetary north node. It's the ruler of that south node. And the planetary north node and Mercury are both ruled by Neptune and Aries. This is that, like you're mustering this up. We're almost there is something there. It doesn't mean that it's going to be once you pass the finish line that there's not more things that we have to do. It doesn't mean that it's finite, but what it means is that there is a distinct beginning and end. And then it becomes about working on something new and just trusting the process. And this takes community. That is the new chapter of community is needing to come together in order for not reform, which is Virgo, but for revolution, Aquarius, for the new foundation. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, I am going to pull in these asteroids because they represent the feminine principle. And they also represent the distortions of the feminine principle and what is going on and what is highlighting and what is driving us to pass the finish line. What I want to say before I jump into this deeper dive of these astrological conversations playing out with these asteroids is that if you connect with these asteroids that I'm about to speak on, I'm going to have an upcoming workshop series called The Forbidden Feminine. It's asteroids of exile, power, and sacred restoration. Okay? And I will be going over Pandora, Medusa, Lilith, Lucretia, and Kassandra. And these are the asteroids besides Lucifer that I am going to be talking about in this 5 week series. That means on Saturdays starting from March 28th to April 21st from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern. And if you want more information, the link is in the description to look at what this is about and what it entails, how much it is, and everything you want to know. The other thing is definitely sign up for my newsletter. I give announcements and updates, and you also get the forecast I do. I did a forecast over this eclipse already, and there is a link below to that as well. And it is not really including these asteroids except for Lilith, and it is more there's a collective theme that I talk about, which is similar to what I just expressed. And I go into depth a little bit more about the nodes and of Aquarius. And then there is a more personal context. Okay, so definitely check those out. So without further ado, let me talk about this, which is we have, first off, I'm going to start with Lucifer, retrograde in Virgo. It is at 14 degrees. It is sextiling Jupiter in Cancer retrograde. Jupiter is ruled by this eclipse, and Lucifer is ruled by that Mercury in Pisces I just spoke about. And Lucifer is where we see the malevolence, the influence of evil, right? And that is essentially what I'm talking about, is there is this influence happening on a global level. And yet Lucifer can be the bearer of light. Where does the bearer of light come from? Well, that is something that I just taught about, and it has its roots in ancient Sumeria and the goddess Inanna, and how that feminine principle of the bearer of light became distorted through patriarchy and religion, um, through language and translations. Um, So I want you to understand that this even reflects this feminine principle of needing to implement what it is that you've learned in situations that have been the bearer of light. All of a sudden, you're confronted with the shadow. All of a sudden, on a global level, we are really being confronted with the shadow, the malevolence, the influence of that. And yet, how is it being the bearer of light? Well, with Jupiter sextiling Lucifer, we are seeing it bearing a light on where malevolence has influenced beliefs and where those beliefs create persecution, Virgo, and how they've been internalized and over-identified on a level that's based in security, Cancer, and how there is a need to liberate from those forms of security based in those beliefs that are distortions of natural law. Natural law is linked to Jupiter, Sag, the ninth house. So we're seeing this play out, and yet there needs to be a integration of natural law and truth that's based in the feminine, Cancer, Taurus, Virgo, to allow that to be the bearer of light so we can bring some type of balance and harmonization into what is going on right now. We are also experiencing this dynamic that is truly unfolding with this solar eclipse in the sign of Aquarius of collective individuated unconscious right now, needing to actualize new values, new beliefs, new philosophies, or what I would say to recover what is natural and timeless, and to fight for it, to stand up for it, to be that spiritual warrior that's indicative of Neptune and Aries. This is where we move into these feminine asteroids. Pandora is retrograde at 28 degrees in the sign of Libra, and she's in conjunct Uranus and Taurus. And Pandora is has her roots linked to Eve and to Lilith, and I'm going to get to Lilith in a minute. She was created by Zeus in the Greek myth. Um, well, she was asked to be created by Zeus, demanded to be created by Zeus after Prometheus brought men the element of fire, and he was angry. And so he wanted to punish men. And so he created a woman in this myth. He got up different gods and had them come together to make Pandora, to bring her to life, to be a vessel. And before she is sent down to Earth to marry Prometheus's brother, she's given a jar and is told to never open it, no matter what. And Hermes, or who we know as Mercury, is the one who brings her down to Earth. And on that trek down to Earth, he whispers in her ear, and this creates an insatiable desire and thirst for knowledge and curiosity. And so when she gets down here, as the story goes, and I'm leaving out gaps for time's sake, I will definitely go over this in the workshop, um, is that she opens the jar and out comes all the evils or sins of the world. She's only left with hope, which is the word elpis. which, by the way, a lot of theologians and anthropologists actually feel like that word translates not into hope, but into expectation. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. And it really is shown no matter what with her being in the sign of Libra right now, retrograde, and in conjunct Uranus and Taurus. Why is this significant? Because if we look at what Pandora represents, is that women are the downfall of men. She was brought to Earth in the Iron Age when work and working was high, the emphasis of the masculine principle, and yet she is viewed as evil, as enticing, as as deceitful, um, doesn't live up to expectations of being a wife. Instead, she unloads evil onto the world, right? And if we look at this through a historical lens, her coming in at the Iron Age and really only being created to be to be subservient, Virgo, um, Lucifer there, in this whole mix. It is really the subjugation of women and only valuing women for what they do and putting them constantly in double bind situations because when we look at what she represents through the myth, she was damned if she did, damned if she didn't. She was meant to serve, and yet men viewed her throughout history as a dependent Libra, and that they were the providers and that she depended on them as the wife. And yet, all the while, the expectation was to only serve them and not to go out and be independent and autonomous. And so when we are looking at Pandora right now and what is being opened up is the subjugation of women, the extremes, Libra, and imbalances that are happening because of the overemphasis on the masculine principle, and Venus in Pisces is ruling Pandora. And so there's this need to recover and apply the feminine principles to reestablish harmony within the collective and personally. The inconjunct with Uranus and Taurus to Pandora is the need for community to come together and to observe and liberate from these distorted values that have been truly highlighted right now, and to create more peace, Pisces, in the world through viewing all as equal, not just women and men, but all different groups of people, and having a reverence for their value systems and how we can learn from those value systems as well. And there can be an integrative process. Okay. Pandora is also trining the eclipse. She's at 28 Libra. This trine is what we call a first quarter trine. So it highlights the extremes that have been playing out within humanity, Libra, Aquarius, and how we are meant to recover balance, Pandora retrograde in Libra, through coming together as community, the eclipse. Venus, Uranus, and Pandora's ruler, like I said, is conjunct that lunar south node. It is balsamic though. So as we apply and try and attempt and put one foot in front of the other to reestablish harmony through integrating both the masculine and the feminine equally, it culminates this dynamic in the past, right? Like I said, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Then what we have is Cassandra at 25 degrees Aries, sextiling the eclipse, um, and opposing Pandora and Libra. Cassandra is where truth is spoken, usually by a woman, going back to the myth of Cassandra. And yet she's cursed to never be believed or heard. And actually, it's her twin brother, Helenus, who's the one who's only ever believed. And so whenever she's trying to um, warn about the Trojan War because she has this prophetic vision, no one believes her. And so it still happens. How many people have been saying, especially women, this is what's happening, this is what's going on, and yet they're not being believed, and the psychological toll that it has taken. And so when we're looking at Cassandra and Aries sextiling the eclipse, it's this need for us to liberate from not believing women and to throw off the opposition to Pandora, retrograde, these imbalances. So it's where women and community coming together in conversation can bring wisdom and truth and help spread a message. And so it's where we're needing to actually listen to each other. And through that listening, not through the filter of our own projections, but through actually observing and opening our ears. Libra, by the way, is the through Venus is how we listen to others. We can actually know what it is that is needed and necessary right now for the collective. And so it is this coming together in community. And Cassandra is ruled by Mars and Aquarius. So there's this need for this action to set goals. And through those goals, we learn new self-knowledge and knowledge on a community humanitarian level that is now meant to be applied, and we're meant to voice it and to continue to have the courage, Aries, even in the face of fear. That is what courage is creating action despite fear, to continue to speak truth, even if it's not being believed or heard, because it could plant a seed that is Aquarius, and to set our eyes on a goal and to continue to do this. Mars in Aquarius, Cassandra's ruler, is also conjunct Medusa. They're both at 19 degrees Aquarius. Medusa, pre-Olympian myth, her origins date back to pre-patriarchal times. The Libyan Amazons, stories in Egypt and North Africa, where women were viewed as powerful and having wisdom. And yet, through Greek mythology, Medusa became distorted. The feminine principle became distorted. Medusa was beautiful, and she was a worshiper of the divine feminine. She worshiped Athena's temple, and she was defiled in Athena's temple by a god. And Athena, instead of getting mad at the god, she decided to punish the victim, Medusa, by turning her into a gorgon and casting her out into isolation. And no matter how anytime a man would come to her, she would turn him into stone. And what this really is reflecting is not the female gaze in this story, it's the male gaze and how it subjugates women and how women are often blamed for things that are not our choice and how we're punished for that. And really, what the feminine gaze that Medusa represents is the reclaiming of the truth and liberating from the images, the distortions, the beliefs that the patriarchy has imposed upon the feminine. And so there's a recovering and a power within the feminine gaze, especially around our sexuality and our creativity. And yet here she is, conjunct with Mars. Mars is balsamic to her, while Mars is ruling Kassandra. And Mars is also ruling Lilith, by the way, who is conjunct Neptune and Saturn, which I will get into in a minute as well. But this is about us recovering that feminine principle and our creativity. I want you to think about what has been happening and what has been highlighted pertaining to the Epstein files, understanding Pandora, Kassandra, and Medusa right now. And then we have Lilith, conjunct Neptune and Saturn, like I said. And Lilith is in a new phase with both, and she is ruled by Mars and Aquarius. And Lilith is our feminine sacred root within each one of our souls. That is not just women, it is men, remembering that the feminine principle resides within all of us. She's in Aries. So it's representing how masculine is actually birthed from the feminine. Think about when we have a baby. It no matter its gender, it is coming out and being birthed from a woman. Makes me think about Tupac in his song. He says, "We're all raised and made by a woman," right? This is like a natural law. So here we have Lilith conjunct Neptune and Saturn, all in Aries, ruled by Mars, which is conjunct Medusa in the sign of Aquarius. And this is really where we are needing to understand that we come from sacred feminine roots, all of us, and how there needs to be an integration of both masculine and feminine, and how there also needs to be objectivity around our anger and our rage that can be sacred whenever it is constructive. Whenever we get into the over identification with the masculine principle, it can become distorted. And so we're needing to bring the feminine principle into that anger and that rage to experience it in a sacred way in order for us to create action, in order for there to be more creativity, more healing, more regaining of the feminine to merge and create more balance and harmony right now and through community. Lilith is sextile Pluto, right? So this is a choice point where it's like collectively we're looking at the underbelly of the rage, the divisiveness, the groups of people, and how we're needing to liberate and individuate collectively through creating action and merging with the feminine principle with the masculine. Then we have, to top it all off, with all of these goddesses that represent these stories, these myths, and the distortions, we have an actual asteroid, Lucretia, that is based in a historical event. There was a woman named Lucretia back in 504 BC. If you have not checked out my video, The Rise of a Woman's Death, Voice Even in Death, go back and check it out. I go into this even more. But Lucretia really represents all of these, how the distortions of all of what I've spoke to can reflect what is going on in the collective through actual humans lived experience. Lucretia was a noblewoman in 504 BC who was sexually assaulted by the Roman monarchy, the king, Sextus Tarquinius' son. And she chose to speak the truth in order to expose the corruption within the government system, within the monarchy. But because of her doing that, and because of the values of the time where women were extensively linked with the family's honor, she decided, instead of to not dishonor her family, that after exposing her sexual assault and the corruption within the government system, that she committed suicide. How we see Lucretia play out now is we see that sometimes. We also see it where people who are exposing truth, right? Because there's a kind of Cassandra dynamic with Lucretia, only it is believed. It's just you get punished for it. We've seen it with major transits from Lucretia to Pluto when Renee Good was killed and Alex Preddy was killed. So we even see this where truth is not it's not safe, where you could be punished, and yet there is a evolution and evolving of this dynamic unfolding right now, because what Lucretia represents is the revolution through exposing. And Lucifer in Virgo retrograde is sextiling Lucretia. Lucretia is ruled by Pluto. And Jupiter, like I said, is sextile Lucifer. So here we have the influence of evil, Lucifer, through beliefs that are distorted and through Jupiter, and how this has perpetuated this Lucretia dynamic of people exposing truth and corruption within systems and being punished for it. Or when we look at Virginia Giuffre, she committed suicide, allegedly. Or we see people like Renee Good and Alex Preddy and all of the people who spoke about ICE on a panel and talked about their impact, right? And here we have the exposing and the truth is being believed. And so this is like the bearer of light quality coming in with Lucifer as well, because what is this doing? Through Lucretia being ruled by Pluto in Aquarius, is that it is creating a revolution or the beginnings of one where community is coming together to create power in numbers, to continue to expose the corruption and speak truth, and to be the bearer of light. Truth, by the way, and beliefs and lies consequently are all Jupiter. So there is this need for the Jupiter being ruled by this eclipse for this liberation to happen and a new karmic chapter to happen through this coming together of all of these archetypes. And it is based in this feminine principle and the need to merge this with the masculine, to balance the scales through Pandora, to have courage with Lilith and Kassandra, and to reclaim creativity and to liberate from dynamics where it's affected our sense of self-worth and esteem, seen through Medusa and Aquarius being ruled by Uranus and Taurus. And so right now, this is what is going on with this eclipse. How is it going to unfold? I don't know. I would be lying if I said that I did. I don't have that capacity. I have the capacity to understand archetypes and to synthesize them and to also research and look at cycles. And what I know is that all of these goddess asteroids in tandem with Lucifer also being linked through the bearer of light to Inanna, all really started the distortions of them the last time Saturn and Neptune were conjunct in Aries at 0 degrees, when government systems, city-states, ancient Sumeria, and Egyptian government all started. That is what I know. And now I'm seeing during this eclipse that a new evolutionary karmic chapter is wanting to begin to liberate from what happened at that conjunction that was seeded in and has been going on for thousands of years. And I see that Saturn right now is balsamic to Neptune and it hasn't perfected its conjunction quite yet. And so all of these feminine energies are highlighting the distortions and how those distortions have reached an all-time high, and how it is the rise of that feminine, even in men right now, who are coming together in community and saying no more. It's not just women, it's men. I even look at queer, non-binary, trans people who are representing the harmonization of the feminine and the masculine, by the way. And more people are getting on board with this because beings have reached such an extreme within the distortions. Within each one of these myths of Lucretia, Medusa, Cassandra, Lilith, and Pandora, those myths and the distortions that they are representing are all things that are happening right now. And yet we have the natural, timeless archetypes held within them that are wanting integration, which we're seeing through all of the trines and the sextiles and conjunctions that they're having with these key planets and with this eclipse. And so there is a rise that is happening. And this is what this eclipse is representing in tandem with all of this. This was a very long video, but it felt important for me to share it. I've been mulling over it for over a week. Usually I would put out a video for an eclipse sooner, but I really wanted to be able to speak to all of this. And these are some of my favorite asteroids that I really connect with. I can't tell you how many journals I have where I've written about them and I've done research. And through connecting this to what is going on right now and how they are deeply, deeply reflected in the astrology, especially the eclipses and that Saturn-Neptune conjunction, and the history that's being evoked right now with these. That is why I wanted to do a 5 series workshop going over each one of these. I hope that this helped you. I hope that it helped you understand or connect or to validate the things that you've been feeling, and think about this in a personal way. If you want to know more about it personally, you can read that article that I wrote for this forecast, but even think about how you're seeing this reflected personally, no matter your gender. That is a social construct, okay? Um, and where it is that you're wanting to harmonize with both through looking at all of this, it personally, I've realized, man, there's like, I see where there's an overemphasis here and an overemphasis here, and where these distortions have played out even in myself. The last thing that I want to say, and I would be remiss, and I'm kind of just hit me, it's something I do want to speak about. When we are thinking about these goddess archetypes and what's going on, I want you to think about how even this can play out within women, because there's so often this talk, men are bad and women are good, and there needs to be this resurgence. And That is also no, that like there needs to be a harmonization. And like I said, it's contained within all of us to highlight this. Yes, we are seeing awful things here in America happen right now. Um, with this distortion of the masculine and the imposition on women and the sex tapes and the more is being exposed, it's going to continue to be exposed. I have a feeling with this eclipse, it's going to expose even more. And also with the lunar eclipse, like these are the times we're in. This is what's been happening is leading up to these eclipses. Karmic beginnings, karmic endings, right? Dealing with these principles. But just to make it clear, we are seeing this play out within women. I want you to think about the women in leadership roles right now in America government systems and where they are denying women's voices and they are representing the distortion of the feminine principle because they've over identified with the patriarchal masculine principle, not the natural masculine principle, the distorted masculine principle. We are seeing this play out right now, and it is appalling to me. Okay, we're seeing it with the Pam Bondis and the Levitts and all of that, like the Ghislaine Maxwell. We're seeing it. So it's not just men who are the perpetrators. We're seeing women be perpetrators too. That is what I mean by it is not a gender dynamic when we're talking about the masculine and feminine principles. It's about which one is over identified with and how is that showing up distorted in both, period. Okay. So I wanted to make myself very clear about that. So this is your forecast. Please sign up for the newsletter. I have the Conscious Compass group. You could join the forum. If you join now, you'll get a link to the newsletter for February and everything I put in it. And you could sign up. I mean, you could come to the live Q&A that's happening on the 21st. So pretty much a week from now. It's a monthly group. There's a forum that you have access to where you can ask questions and post things in between, where we can dive into some of this stuff. Like I said, I have this um, five, uh, it's a 5 class series workshop coming up at the end of March. Um, and or you can always book a one-on-one session with me. I love connecting with each and every one of you. And please, you know, each one of us has something unique and invaluable to offer. It is connecting with that and through the spirit of source and not doubting ourselves, no matter how small or insignificant that gift feels. It's about showing up and utilizing it to be of service to the whole right now. And that is something that is being reflected in this lunation, this eclipse. And I do write about it in the written forecast. So until next time, you guys, I'll see you then.